By 1914, Europe's great powers were divided into two rival alliances. On one side, the Triple Entente of France, Britain, and Russia. On the other, the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austro-Hungary, and Italy. Both expected a short, glorious victory. The violence began in the Balkan city of Sarajevo. That Russian mobilization forced Germany's hand, prompting a German declaration of war on Russia. Germany knew fighting Russia meant a simultaneous fight with France. To avoid a two-front war, they executed the Schlieffen Plan, aiming to quickly sweep through neutral Belgium to encircle Paris before Russia could fully mobilize. That invasion of neutral territory crossed a red line for London, which had guaranteed Belgian neutrality. Britain immediately issued an ultimatum to Berlin. When it was ignored, the British Empire declared war. Within days, the diplomatic machinery had commanded 6 million men to leave their homes and march to the front lines. The alliance system was originally designed to prevent conflict by promising mutual destruction. Instead, it functioned as a mechanical trap. Once that first gear turned in the Balkans, the entire European continent was forcefully pulled into the devastating machinery. Those millions of marching men collided in the Battle of the Frontiers, suffering enormous casualties. The sweeping offensives failed, and to survive the deadly storm of modern firepower, armies on the Western Front did the only thing they could. They dug into the earth. What began as temporary shelter hardened into a continuous 350-mile network of trenches, stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. Deadly machine gun fire and relentless artillery shells made crossing the space between them virtually impossible. With Europe deadlocked, the empires desperately looked to outflank each other. They expanded the conflict globally, igniting new battlefronts in the Caucasus, the sands of the Middle East, the beaches of Gallipoli, and deep into European colonies in Africa. The blockade extended to the oceans. The British Royal Navy cut off contraband and food imports, aiming to starve Germany's economy. In retaliation, Germany deployed a lethal new challenge, the U-boat, capable of striking unseen from beneath the waves. Traditional battlefield victories were no longer possible. The conflict was now a global siege. To break that siege, military engineers initiated a terrifying technological arms race. At the Second Battle of Ypres, Germany introduced chemical warfare to the Western Front, releasing clouds of lethal chlorine gas. Soldiers on both sides were quickly issued crude masks, transforming the human face of war into something entirely alien. Combat expanded into the sky with Zeppelins bombing British cities, while new fighter planes equipped with synchronized machine guns fought for air superiority. On the ground, the British introduced the armored tank to physically crush the barbed wire. Even with these weapons, breakthroughs failed. High commands shifted their strategy entirely. At Verdun and the Somme, offensives were no longer planned to capture territory. They were designed as mathematical equations of attrition, mincing machines built specifically to bleed the enemy's manpower dry. The toll was staggering. Millions of soldiers fell, alongside millions of civilians who succumbed to starvation, disease, and targeted atrocities, including the systematic deportation and murder of over 1 million ethnic Armenians by the Ottoman Empire. Human life had now been reduced to raw fuel, fed endlessly into a mechanical engine of industrialized slaughter that neither side could figure out how to shut down. By 1917, the sheer pressure of that attrition began to break empires from the inside out. In Russia, massive casualties and severe bread shortages sparked civilian riots that quickly morphed into full-scale revolution. The Tsar abdicated, and Lenin's Bolshevik Party seized power. They immediately signed an armistice with the Central Powers, knocking Russia out of the war and freeing up 500,000 German troops to move to the Western Front. Knowing they would eventually lose a long war against Allied resources, German leadership rolled the dice. They resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, calculating they could sink enough shipping to starve Britain into surrender within 6 months. But the shoot-on-sight tactic inevitably caught neutral American passenger and merchant ships in the crossfire. This, along with secret German overtures to Mexico, outraged President Woodrow Wilson and finally pulled the United States into the fight. The pursuit of total victory had successfully destroyed the Russian Empire, but by utilizing the submarine tactics needed to survive the blockade, Germany tipped the global balance of power permanently against themselves, awakening an untouched industrial giant. In the spring of 1918, Germany launched one final massive onslaught to win the war before American numbers could overwhelm them. The offensive broke through initially, but exhausted German troops were ultimately halted. With 10,000 fresh American soldiers arriving daily, the Allies launched a devastating 100-day counterattack. The Central Powers systematically disintegrated. Bulgaria fell, then the Ottoman Empire, and finally Austro-Hungary. Facing mutiny and internal revolution, the German Kaiser abdicated. On November 11, 1918, an armistice was signed. The fighting stopped. The victors gathered outside Paris to dictate the peace. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh, punitive terms on a newly formed German republic, restricting its military, seizing its colonies, and forcing it to accept full responsibility for the conflict. The global map was torn apart. 4 major empires, the Russian, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman, vanished. New nations emerged in Eastern Europe, and the Middle East was carved into territories controlled heavily by London and Paris. Over 9 million soldiers and 7 million civilians were dead. Another 21 million were wounded. Huge swaths of the European continent were left shattered. The vanishing of 4 empires and the physical devastation of a continent left the world unrecognizable. The peace treaties redrew maps and shifted power, but they failed to solve the rivalries that started the fighting, leaving those resentments to fuel a second conflict 20 years later.